Our top story, deja vu all over again. We're just 3 days away from the new year, but we're already getting a flashback to New Year's 2020. That's when we first began hearing about this strange new virus emerging in China. Now, this time, we're praying that as a new COVID outbreak unfolds in China due to their abrupt ending of the zero COVID policy, that they won't start another outbreak outside their borders as they did 3 years ago. Already, there's some ominous signs. The Chinese government announced this week that it would no longer be issuing data on new cases or deaths from their massive outbreak. Of course, nobody really trusted their numbers, but this complete blackout of data suggests the worst. Then there's the question of travel. That's the way China spread the virus 3 years ago. Now, I know that's a harsh charge, but the evidence is pretty clear. In late 2019 and early 2020, the Chinese government prevented citizens of Wuhan from traveling to other parts of China because they realized how contagious COVID was. At the same time, they continued letting Wuhan merchants and tourists travel freely to Europe and America, triggering the first severe outbreaks in the West. Today, the U.S. and other countries are requiring tests for folks arriving from China, which is all well and good. But is that enough? Initial reports are not good. Yesterday, 2 flights from China landed in Milan, Italy. According to the Italian Health Ministry, 50% of the passengers on both flights tested positive for COVID. Think about that, 50%. Presumably, those passengers are being isolated, but what about the other 50%? And could they be bringing a new variant of COVID against which our natural immunity and vaccines are ineffective? That is, could we be seeing the beginning of another worldwide outbreak? For details, we bring back one of the world's top researchers on the origins of COVID virus, COVID-19, Dr. Stephen Quay. He's founder of the Seattle-based Atossa Therapeutics, and we thank him for coming in. Good to see you again, Doctor. First of all, what are you hearing about the outbreak in China?
Well, it's great to see you, David. So there's some good news and bad news. The good news is that the variants that are coming out of China are only slightly evolving from the variants we've been seeing for 3 years. So a nice analysis done by a group in Germany called GSAD, where we looked at about 50 of the Chinese sequences and compared them to 14 million sequences over the last 3 years. And they're just 1 or 2 mutations. So it's a very slow process, very different from Omicron, which had a year of new evolution when it hit us. So the good news is these variants are things that we've sort of seen before. The bad news is that we know that travel bans don't work, and this is really a travel ban light. We did a complete ban of China in February 2020, and that didn't work, of course. And when Omicron came out of Africa, we did a complete ban of 9 African countries, and that didn't work. This is not even a ban from China. This is a ban of people who test positive. But we know the tests take 2 or 3 days. So I think that this is more, this is not intended to be a strong health policy. Let me put it that way.
Now, you mentioned that we stopped the flights from China in February of 2020. Hadn't the damage already been done, though? It was in late it was in late 2019 when all of those flights from Wuhan, particularly to Italy and other parts of Europe, infected that population. And our first outbreak in New York came from the European variant, not directly from China. So, I mean, really, we waited too long, and I'm just wondering if we're waiting now until January 5th before even beginning testing in the United States. Shouldn't we start at least the testing right now?
Well, I mean, the sooner that you do it, the better. We've known that China's been exploding for over a month with cases. Half of Shanghai, 25 million people have COVID right now. So we probably should have done it earlier, but the history is that these travel bans simply don't work in any case.
And, I mentioned in my introduction the fact that we had these 2 planes from China to Milan. 50% of the passengers in both planes were infected with COVID. I mean, that's an extraordinary number. Now, presumably, the Italian health authorities will be able to analyze those sicknesses and figure out if there are new variants among them, right?
Well, that's right, yes. And we already know that there are new variants coming out of China, but they're only slightly different. So they're not a major change.
What about the government, the Chinese government's decision to black out all of the data? As I said, nobody really trusts any statistics coming out from the government of China on whatever it is. But still, now they're blacking out the whole thing on new cases and deaths. What do you make of that?
Well, it's very unfortunate, obviously. So we've been able to get some sequence data out, but the more transparent, a government or a health policy is, the better. I think you can read into it what it is intended, which is that they're having a real outbreak. They're not well vaccinated. They're not well exposed because they had such a horrendous lockdown. So they're having their turn of getting major COVID disease spreading through their population.
Doctor, I want to switch a little bit to the origins of COVID, which we still obviously haven't gotten to the bottom of yet. Are there any new details on discovering the origins?
Well, I think we continue to find nuances. So mostly what is being found now is things that I would call consciousness of guilt. So when you get FOIA requests for scientists talking about the origin, their true feelings are in private in emails and conversations. They're sort of much different from what they said publicly. So that's kind of the newest things coming out. But we still don't have it's never been found in an animal. There's no intermediate host. The virus shows no what's called posterior diversity, so it hadn't been in animals according to the genetic sequence, and no one in Wuhan has any antibodies against it in blood from before about September at least. So it's the hallmarks of a natural spread. The three hallmarks don't exist here.
But Dr. Quay, I'm going to quote from Health Alliance, which is the group that the NIH was funding that was dealing with the Wuhan lab. They, of course, take the opposite view of that. And I'm quoting from their response to a former vice president of theirs who came out with a book about the history of the Wuhan, their relationship with the Wuhan lab. They say, they claim that there is no, and I'm quoting them, no verifiable and credible evidence or scientific data to support the theory that COVID-19 originated in a lab leak. They say that it was a spillover from animals to humans in nature. They say there's no evidence to back up what you say. Is that true?
No, it's not true. The virus itself is sort of the witness. So there are the sequence features like the furin cleavage site, which hasn't been seen in 1,000 years. The human adaptation of the virus, which has never been seen before. I mean, the virus and the host develop a relationship between each other, and the virus will tell you what its favorite host is when it first came out, and its favorite host was humans from the first day, and that can only happen in humanized serial passage in the laboratory, which is what legitimate scientists were saying privately over the early part of 2020.
Well, does it surprise you then that EcoHealth got another NIH funding grant in October?
Those are political decisions. It does surprise me, obviously, just as a scientist myself. But I don't want to get into that.
All right, but again, it's a scientific question as well as a political one. Dr. Stephen Quay, great to see you again. Thank you for the details on this very important subject. Appreciate it.